Buldir Field Camp, Buldir Field Camp. The Aleutian turn, Whiskey Zulu 2002, how do you read? Buldir Field Camp, Buldir Field Camp, Whiskey Zulu 2002, the Aleutian turn. We're running to altitude to wait out the storm. Do you copy, over?
These are the Aleutians. Fierce gales blow up here in a matter of hours. It is a birthplace of storms, a cradle of the wind. The islands rise several thousand feet to challenge the storms and plunge more than 4 miles to the ocean floor. They form a unique mountain range of subterranean volcanoes, emerging like stepping stones into the sea. Their path leads 1,100 miles from mainland Alaska across the North Pacific toward Asia. The violence of the Aleutian weather echoes the turmoil going on beneath the surface. The entire chain of islands rides a line of inner friction where one plate of the Earth's crust grinds slowly under another. This movement breeds quakes, tidal waves, and the volcanic eruptions that form the islands themselves. In spite of forbidding weather and trembling Earth, the Aleutians are paradise. Paradise for millions of marine birds and mammals. East meets west in a melting pot of plant and animal life from 2 continents. The eastern half of the chain, linking outward from mainland Alaska, supports flora and fauna native to North America. While the western islands, which come within a few hundred miles of Siberia, harbor birds more typical of Asia. The song sparrow of the western Aleutians is darker than its eastern island counterpart, and both are much larger than their mainland American cousins. These islands are the only place in North America where some kinds of plant and animal life can be found. Whiskered auklets, the shyest members of the vast auklet colonies, nest only here and off the Russian coast. Wildlife is drawn to the Aleutians, and it thrives here. Ocean waters teem with marine organisms. Each one provides abundant food for a larger organism in an extensive food web from algae to killer whales. The presence of kelp affects the abundance of mussels, barnacles, chitons, and limpets. Sea urchins graze on kelp, and in turn are food for sea otters and eider ducks. The system is enriched and renewed through the droppings of millions of seabirds, flying fertilizer factories of the sea. These ocean wanderers come ashore only to ensure a new generation. They spend most of their lives somewhere out to sea. Asian red-legged and North American black-legged kittiwakes make their seasonal nurseries on the face of cliffs. These nest sites are the first to be released from the snowy grip of winter, so their chicks are among the first to hatch. Crested and least auklets take advantage of the earthquake damage on the islands. and choose nest sites deep within rock slides, in dark, clammy chambers and crevices. Their strange calls echo from beneath the boulders. The auklets socialize on the surface before going out to sea to feed each morning and evening. Pigeon guillemots return from fishing trips with food for their hungry families, awaiting them below in the boulders at the surf's edge. Guillemots share the beach with glaucous-winged gulls and the most massive island visitor, the lions of the sea. Tens of thousands of stellar sea lions come ashore in the Aleutians each spring. Battle-scarred bulls, some weighing 1 ton, stake out territories and defend them throughout the summer, never going to sea to feed. The sea lion cows give birth to their pups here and mate again. On these crowded maternity beaches, a pup must quickly learn the sound of its mother's voice to stay alive. Pups soon scramble about and get into brawls like their elders. But the cows have to coax their pups into the water and teach them how to swim. Generation after generation of sea lions and seabirds have been raised on these remote island nurseries, almost undisturbed by civilization. The first wave of human influence came softly. Over 9,000 years ago, coastal people from Asia, who had traveled across the Bering Land Bridge, began drifting out onto this chain of islands. Sea-oriented people, they used resources of the nurseries, tide pools, and ocean to survive. By the time the Russian explorer Vitus Bering reached this part of Alaska in 1741, the Aleutian wildlife supported the densest native population in the north. The Russians saw the Aleutians as a treasure chest waiting just for them. Seals and sea otters were the furry gems. This second wave of human influence hit with a crash. The value of a sea otter's pelt in foreign markets led to the exploitation and near extinction of this animal, and the Aleut people as well. Slavery, disease, and loss of wild food sources reduced the Aleut population from about 20,000 to 1,000 in less than a century. When Alaska was sold to the United States in 1867, the pillage of marine furs increased until only an international treaty could save the seals and otters. In a growing national awareness of Alaska's marine resources, President Taft declared the Aleutian Islands a wildlife preserve in 1913. They became a public trust and stand today with 400 other such areas in the National Wildlife Refuge System. Yet man's impact was again to be felt. This time, it came like a tidal wave. World War II. Tens of thousands of men swarmed over islands that had only been visited by a handful of humans. Lagoons were drained to build runways. Tent cities dug into the tundra. War brought the names of the Aleutian Islands, Kiska, Adak, and Amchitka to the lips of millions of Americans. The Japanese had struck first. They bombed Dutch Harbor and then fled west, seizing the islands of Kiska and Attu and shipping the Aleut villagers on Attu to the clay mines in Japan. Because of the Aleutian's strategic location, the islands had become highly sought prizes for Japanese forces and equally valuable defense positions for the Allies in World War II. But both sides would have to fight the elements before they could fight each other. Invasions were postponed due to gale force winds, 60-foot seas, and zero ceilings. The warning was, if you can't see your co-pilot, it's too thick to fly. More planes were lost to wind and storm than to enemy fire. In a single cloud front, a bomber could pick up a ton of ice. The dismal climate caused more battle fatigue than actual combat. In the almost month-long battle to recapture Attu, severe frostbite and trenchfoot casualties took the heaviest single toll in the American landing force. Nearly 500,000 U.S. military personnel served time out here, many calling it unjust penal servitude. Then, it was over.
Buldir Field Camp, Buldir Field Camp, Buldir Field Camp. The Aleutian turn, Whiskey Zulu 2002 calling. Do you read, over?
WZ2002, this is Buldir Field Camp. How you doing, Skipper? Over.
Buldir Field Camp, the Aleutian turn back. Yeah, just fine. The gale's over, and we should be anchored off Buldir in the morning, ready to unload fuel and groceries, over.
Roger, Skipper. That's great news. We should be glad to see you. Rations are getting real low over here.
It is mid-July. Biologists of the Aleutian Islands National Wildlife Refuge are studying the wildlife of Buldir Island, a tiny 3 by 5 mile dot in the middle of a 120-mile stretch of open ocean. Eccentric, its 2,100-foot volcanic peak creates the island's own fog and wind. Because the island lacks a harbor, all people and supplies must be ferried by rubber boat. The job must be completed quickly so the turn can run for shelter if another storm blows up. The next closest island is 7 hours away. Mail, fuel, and fresh food are good excuses to relax and celebrate before beginning another day's work. Aleutian wildlife may be a biologist's dream, but the island's working conditions test a person's dedication.
You end up walking through lush vegetation knee-deep in early July, and it goes to perhaps shoulder-deep to a 6-foot man by mid-August. Each one holds about a quart of water, so that you need rain gear all the time to move through it. The climate is very Aleutian-like. You hear all the time about how bad the weather is in the Aleutian Islands, if you hear about them at all. And they fairly well live up to it in midsummer. As far as fog's concerned, we call it the fog season, and by the middle of July, it's the rule rather than the exception that we have foggy conditions sometimes right down to sea level. And it can come in very quickly and then leave fairly quickly as well, although it comes and stays from mid-July to perhaps mid-August.
It's an exciting event when the sun breaks through the fog for an hour or so, but the sun makes the juices of the cow parsnip flow, blistering any skin that brushes against it. Buldir is the last nesting stronghold of an endangered species, the Aleutian Canada goose. They once nested by the thousands on islands throughout the western two-thirds of the chain. But that was before foxes were added to the ecosystem in another wave of human impact that, in its way, left a more lasting influence than all the others. Although the Russians started the practice earlier, between 1910 and 1930, fur farmers dropped off pairs of Arctic foxes on nearly every island where no land mammals were known. On some islands, the foxes multiplied by the thousands and wiped out many ground-nesting birds in doing so. Hardest hit was the Aleutian Canada goose. Only on remote, harborless Buldir Island did the geese survive in the Aleutians. Unlike the sea otter, which needed only protection to recover in this island habitat, the Aleutian Canada goose needs more help. Biologists are working on the refuge and at research centers in the lower 48 states to learn more about the endangered geese to aid in their recovery. For 3 summers, a small team of biologists have combed Buldir's hillsides in search of geese to band. They watch ahead for waving grass, the sign of a running goose.
Hey, there's a goose. Okay, go. Where's that? Hey, Goblin! Easy. Yeah, watch it. Watch it. Don't step on Okay. Get that one, John. There he goes. There he
Adult geese are unable to fly at this time because they are growing new wing feathers. The goslings are old enough to allow safe handling.
What do we got? Watch the grass move. More? Watch the grass move. I got one. Okay, I got one.
Because the tiny Aleutian geese look similar to other small Canada geese, identification has always been uncertain anywhere away from the islands. The measurements and weights being taken by the biologists will serve as vital statistics for identifying the species. The most important question the biologists have helped to answer is where the geese fly in winter. No one knew. Some guessed Japan, some Canada, or the West Coast. Leg bands solved the mystery. Moving quickly to return family groups to the wild, the biologists place leg bands on each bird. The metal band is coded to identify this bird. The colored band provides easy and positive identification from a distance, eliminating the need to recapture the bird. With each bird they released, the biologists sent their hopes. Observers were alerted along potential migration routes. The watch was on. After many months, report of a banded Aleutian finally arrived from California near the Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge. By spring of 1975, more sightings traced the elusive birds to Castle Rock, lying a quarter-mile off the northern California coast. This proposed National Wildlife Refuge bears a striking resemblance to Buldir, but there the similarities stop. To protect these endangered birds, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the state of California closed Canada goose hunting in the main wintering areas used by the geese. The geese roost on Castle Rock at night and feed on the mainland during the day, soon to return northward to Buldir.
John, I don't want to do this.
I don't know, Dennis. I think you've been out here too long.
You promised to take one too, Duff?
Oh, yeah. Right behind you.
Okay.
Oh! Oh! Oh!
All right.
Fresh from the glaciers. Can't beat it. Oh. What are those goosebumps for?
Down there. Well, John, I don't know. Maybe we better wait another day. It's pretty cold.
I don't know.
Although the island's seabirds number in the millions, their habits are almost as mysterious as those of the endangered goose. Little is known about their nesting and feeding rhythms, reproductive success, and where all the colonies are located throughout the 1,100-mile-long refuge. Data gathered on these subjects will help answer the biggest question: how vulnerable are these seabirds to commercial fishing nets, oil spills, and such natural disasters as earthquakes?
Tufted and horned puffins coexist throughout about half of their breeding ranges. The main purpose of our research on Buldir Island this summer is to examine closely the feeding ecologies of the two species. The information we have gathered so far indicates that tufted puffins probably feed further out to sea than do the horned puffins.
The storm petrel, like other seabirds, is vulnerable to oil spills most of its life. Once on land, the birds are nocturnal. They change shifts and leave their burrows to feed only at night, as the biologists discovered by banding and weighing them. Research sometimes continues around the clock, if necessary. This is the biologist's only opportunity to study the strange nocturnal ritual of the ancient murrelets. Only a day or two old, murrelet chicks are led to the sea.
We tried to band some of these birds so that we can try to determine both movement and try to get an idea of survivability. The vegetation is incredibly high compared to them. They weigh only about 28 to 30 grams. So to them, this grass looks as if it's relative to the redwoods to us.
The chicks must make it through the surf and out to the open ocean before scavenging gulls find them. The exodus of the ancient murrelets is a signal. Summer is fading. Common eiders that nested in the beach boulders quickly follow, leading their brood of ducklings to the sea. Young glaucous-winged gulls have a harder time taking the big step. Sea lion pups are growing rapidly. They too frolic in the surf, strengthening their swimming muscles for the long winter ahead. Defying the waning season, the delicate flowers of marsh and tundra turn the islands into wild gardens of color. Perches are a premium on islands with no trees, but the Lapland longspur improvises on almost anything. Soon, it too will leave the islands. Although some songbirds stay all year, the longspur prefers to miss the violent Aleutian winters and fly south. By September, the skies belong to the geese. Most seabirds have also completed their cycle on land and returned to sea for 8 months. The biologists hope someday to see the geese flying throughout the Aleutians. Once breeding populations are reestablished on other islands, these birds may no longer need the special protection given to endangered species. But for now, it's time to leave. Like the departing wildlife, the field crews of the Aleutian Islands National Wildlife Refuge relinquish their camps to return to their headquarters on Adak Island before winter storms can maroon them. A change has come to the Aleutians. In the ebb and flow of humans impacting the islands, this new wave has arrived to make amends, to put the ecosystem back in order, and to learn from it.